Last night, Jimmy Kimmel's stage didn't host a legend. It collided with one. Clint Eastwood walked on with quiet resolve and walked off, leaving the studio in stunned silence. What was supposed to be a laid-back interview about his new film turned into a moment no one saw coming. One side cracking jokes, the other side staring down the spotlight like it owed him respect. A cowboy icon met a late-night comic and the script unraveled fast. Jimmy tossed the jokes. Clint didn't laugh. Instead, he called out the show's circus, the gimmicks, the phony laughs. It wasn't a meltdown, it was a takedown. No yelling, no tantrum. Just one man refusing to be handled. The audience froze, phones went up, and the moment ignited the internet. TikTok exploded, Twitter lit up, and YouTube was flooded with reaction videos by sunrise. This wasn't just talk show tension. This was two eras crashing head-on in front of a live crowd. And Clint Eastwood didn't flinch. He didn't play along. He played it real. Drop your city in the comments and hit subscribe. You're watching the Showdown spot, where legends don't follow the script. They rewrite it. And sometimes they burn the stage down on the way out. The audience inside Jimmy Kimmel Live was electric. Phones were tucked away, eyes fixed on the stage, and whispers rippled through the crowd. They were waiting for Clint Eastwood, the legend, the outlaw. And when he finally stepped through the curtain, the room shifted. No wave, no smile. Just a slow, deliberate walk with Maggie a few steps behind, eyes locked on every producer. Clint didn't bring an entourage. He didn't bring hype. He brought presence. The crowd erupted in applause, but Clint didn't play to them. He gave Jimmy a firm handshake, iron grip, deadpan stare, and took his seat without a word. Jimmy opened with his usual charm, smooth jokes, and warm energy, easing the crowd into laughter. A few lines about Clint's film, a couple cowboy quips, and the audience was right where Jimmy liked them. But Clint wasn't buying in. He spoke low and steady about the film, about land, loyalty, and grit. His words were sharp, not promotional. This wasn't marketing. This was testimony. He wasn't here to entertain. He was here to speak. Then Jimmy started to drift. A joke about Clint's cowboy days, a wink at the audience, a prop in hand. The energy started to shift. Clint's face didn't move, but the message was clear. He wasn't amused. He wasn't here for games. And Maggie, from the wings, watched the moment with quiet warning in her eyes. She'd seen this before. Jimmy hadn't. But he was about to. Because Clint Eastwood doesn't do dress-up. He doesn't play along. And when a talk show starts turning into a stage play, Clint knows exactly when to flip the script. The tension was building, and it was only going one way. Jimmy, sensing the moment starting to cool, shifted gears. He pulled out a story from the archives, something he figured would get a laugh and lighten the mood. "So, Clint," he said with that practiced smirk, "is it true you once got into a bar fight during the filming of Hang 'em High?" The audience chuckled, leaning in for what they thought would be a fun old-school tale. Clint didn't smile. He didn't blink. He looked straight at Jimmy and said, "Didn't happen." The words were flat, not angry, not amused, just final. There was a pause. Jimmy chuckled nervously, tried to shrug it off. "Well, that's what the legend says, right?" He grinned, searching for a way to pivot. The audience gave him a courtesy laugh, but the air had already shifted. Clint's eyes were locked on him, steady and unflinching. Then Jimmy made the mistake Maggie warned them about. He reached under his desk and pulled out a cowboy hat, the kind you'd find in a costume store. Tacky, oversized, a joke by design. He held it up, grinning. "Come on, Clint. One quick shot for the fans." The audience laughed. Some clapped, expecting Clint to play along. Clint didn't move. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just said, "Put that away." 4 words, and the whole room froze. The laughter stopped like someone had cut the sound. The lights didn't dim, but it suddenly felt darker. Maggie stood backstage, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Jimmy. This was the moment she knew would come. Jimmy, still holding the hat, tried to chuckle it off, but the weight in Clint's voice crushed any attempt at levity. The hat landed on the desk with a soft thud. No one clapped. No one laughed. Clint sat still, his stare burning through the air. It wasn't anger. It wasn't aggression. It was something deeper, older. It was a man drawing a line, and everyone in that studio knew it. Not because he yelled, not because he made a scene, but because when Clint Eastwood says no, the room listens. Jimmy cleared his throat, trying to push past the heavy silence Clint had dropped on the studio. He forced a smile, tapping his cards on the desk like a nervous tick, and said, "All right, let's talk more about your film. It's about loyalty, justice, right? Classic Clint stuff." He tried to inject some warmth into the moment, leaning back, hoping Clint would meet him halfway. But Clint didn't soften. He leaned forward slightly, his voice still low but firm. "It's about people who fight back when they're pushed. Not folks who perform for applause. Not folks who spin stories for ratings." His eyes didn't leave Jimmy's. There was no confusion about the target. Jimmy gave a tight laugh, quick and high. "Well, we're just trying to have a little fun," he offered, waving at the crowd like they were part of the joke. But the audience wasn't laughing. Not anymore. Some clapped. Others just sat, watching Clint with a mix of awe and uncertainty. "You brought me here to sell something?" Clint continued. "I'm not a product. I came here to talk about a story that matters. You turned it into a skit." The studio buzzed. A low murmur rippled through the rows of seats. Someone yelled, "Let him speak!" and a handful of others clapped. It wasn't chaos yet, but it was close. Jimmy tried again, his voice a touch louder now. "Look, Clint, it's a talk show. People come here, they laugh, they unwind." Clint cut in. "People come here to be distracted. That's fine. But don't drag me into it and expect me to dance." The crowd reacted again. Louder this time. Some cheering, others clearly uncomfortable. A few looked around like they'd accidentally walked into something they shouldn't be seeing. Real tension, unscripted, and it was magnetic. Backstage, Maggie stood with her arms crossed, eyes on the monitor. She didn't blink. One of the younger producers whispered, "Should we step in?" Maggie didn't look away. She just muttered, "They're about to learn." Jimmy glanced off stage for help, but no one moved. The control room had gone silent, the director whispering to hold the feed. The ratings were spiking. But no one knew how to steer this ship. Clint shifted in his seat, gaze still locked. "You think this is all a game? You pull stunts, cue laughter, cut the parts that don't test well. I've been in this business long enough to know when the story's real and when it's for sale." The audience clapped again, this time louder. Jimmy's smile faltered. His fingers gripped the card tighter than before. He had walked into a conversation expecting nostalgia and headlines. What he got was a reckoning, and Clint was just getting started. Jimmy tried to shift the energy, lifting his cue card and reading off a question that was meant to lighten the mood. "Clint," he said, "of all the roles you've played, is there one you'd still go back and revisit? Maybe bring back the poncho?" He gave a half smile, hoping for a laugh or even just a grunt. Anything. But Clint didn't even blink. He didn't touch the question. He didn't shift in his chair. His voice came out slow and clear. "I'm not here to be your punchline." The words stopped the room. Jimmy lowered his card. "Clint," he said, trying to keep the smile alive, "we brought you here with respect. You're a legend. Everyone watching loves you. This is your moment." Clint leaned forward, eyes locked on Jimmy. "Respect isn't an invitation," he said. "It's earned." The audience erupted. Some clapped, some shouted his name, others just sat there, stunned. The energy surged, splitting the crowd. Some stood, some gasped. Phones went up, catching the raw tension now boiling over. Jimmy stood, pressing his hands to the desk. "You think we don't respect you? You're sitting on this stage because we do. We wanted to celebrate your work." Clint stood too. Slowly, deliberately, taller than expected, more commanding than the lights could contain. "You don't celebrate by mocking," he said. "You don't honor someone by turning their work into a gimmick for ratings." Jimmy's jaw flexed. His voice had lost the easy tone. "This is entertainment, Clint. The whole point is to make people feel good, to make them laugh." Clint didn't raise his voice. He didn't point. He didn't move toward Jimmy. He just stood there, calm and carved from conviction. "You think that means anything to me? I came here to talk about land, about the people who get chewed up by greed. I came to talk about a film that matters. And instead, you ask about ponchos." The crowd roared again. Cheers, whistles. Some laughed nervously. Others shouted support. A few booed. The tension cracked open the room. Jimmy stepped back, shaken. "You're blowing this out of proportion." Clint held his ground. "No," he said. "You're shrinking it to fit your show." There was nothing performative in the way he said it. No yelling. No grand exit. Just truth dropped like a hammer. Backstage, Maggie had stopped pacing. She was still now, her arms folded as she watched Clint take the room without saying more than what needed to be said. Jimmy's hands were at his sides now, palms tight. He tried to laugh it off, looking toward the band, but even they were frozen, their instruments quiet. The silence stretched. Clint didn't move. He wasn't waiting for permission. He wasn't waiting for the cameras to cut. He had made his point. The director whispered frantically in the control room, asking if they should go to break. The floor producer shook his head, eyes wide on the scene unfolding. Everyone knew they were watching something different, something that wouldn't be edited down or clipped out of context. It was too raw for that. Jimmy finally broke the silence. "Well, that was real," he said, trying to joke, but his voice cracked halfway through. Clint didn't respond. He just stepped back, calm as ever, looking across the room like he'd just finished a speech no one could follow. The moment didn't belong to the show anymore. It belonged to Clint. Jimmy tried to salvage the wreckage. He reached for a lighter tone, forced a smile, and glanced toward the cue cards again. "All right, let's talk about the film's cinematography," he said, his voice unsteady, like someone clinging to the edge of a cliff. "I heard you insisted on shooting on location. Real dirt, real wind, very Eastwood." But Clint didn't let it pass. He didn't even sit back down. His voice came in steady and sharp. "You don't get to pivot now." The audience gasped. A wave of murmurs rippled across the studio. Phones were out. Faces were lit by the glow of recording screens. They weren't watching a talk show anymore. They were witnessing a moment, real and raw. Jimmy's smile dropped for good. He glanced off stage. Behind the cameras, producers were scrambling. The director's voice barked in headsets. "Do we cut? Go to break? What the hell's the call?" Security took 2 cautious steps toward the stage. 2 men in black suits, hands hovering near their belts, unsure how to approach a legend in full standoff mode. But before they could take another step, Maggie moved. She stepped forward from the wings, her voice firm, icy. "You don't touch him." The guards froze. One looked to the floor manager, who immediately shook his head. No one was making that mistake. Not tonight. Back on stage, Clint turned slightly toward the crowd. He didn't wave, didn't try to explain. He just let the silence settle, then delivered the final line. "I said what I came to say," he told the room. "Final." Then he turned. No flourish, no music cue. Just Clint Eastwood walking off the set like he'd just finished a shootout and left the saloon standing. The audience reacted in a wave, some on their feet clapping, others shouting, some just frozen in disbelief. The cheers were loud, the murmurs louder. Phones were held high, recording every step as Clint walked with measured ease toward the wings, where Maggie waited. Jimmy didn't follow. He stood alone at the desk, blinking. His hand rested on the cue cards, but he didn't lift them again. The show's tone had collapsed. The script meant nothing now. The band played a few confused notes. Jimmy looked at the camera, but even he knew the usual charm wouldn't land. His eyes flicked to the director. The signal finally came. Fade to black. But Clint had already made his exit, and the stage would never feel the same. The internet didn't just react, it exploded. Within minutes of Clint's walk-off, hashtags like Eastwood versus Kimmel, Legend Walks, and Talk Show Takedown were trending across X. TikTok was instantly flooded with vertical clips of Clint's final words, stitched with dramatic music and freeze frames. YouTube reaction videos popped up like wildfire, each one trying to decode every eyebrow raise, pause, and stare down. One popular edit played Clint's walk-off in slow motion with a Western standoff soundtrack. Another stitched-together fan comments, "That's not a meltdown. That's a masterclass in holding the line." A meme went viral showing Jimmy holding the cowboy hat with the caption, "He brought a prop." Clint brought the truth. On X, the debate lit up. One camp argued Jimmy went too far, disrespecting a guest for cheap laughs. Others said Clint was too serious, that he should have known what late night meant. One post summed it up perfectly. This wasn't a guest losing control. This was a host losing his grip. Fans were split. Some declared Clint a legend for standing his ground, refusing to play the game. Others said he overreacted, calling it a generational clash. Old Hollywood versus the viral age. The crowd in the comments ranged from "Clint showed him how a real man exits" to "It's a talk show, not a courtroom." By the time Jimmy Kimmel returned the next night, the studio buzzed with expectation. He opened with a cracked grin, trying to find his footing again. "Well," he said, glancing at the audience, "last night we invited a cowboy, and he brought the storm." The crowd chuckled, but it wasn't the usual roar. It was polite, a bit cautious, like everyone was still trying to figure out where the line had been crossed. The clip of Jimmy's opening monologue hit YouTube within minutes and racked up views fast. But the comment section wasn't all laughs. Many still had Clint's voice ringing in their ears. "Respect isn't an invitation. It's earned." And those words were still echoing across timelines, threads, and feeds. Backstage, the storm didn't end with Clint's exit. CBS producers were furious. Phones lit up, meeting requests stacked, and internal Slack channels boiled over. Advertisers who had bought prime spots for the episode began reaching out within the hour. Some were concerned. Others were just confused. Had this been planned? Was it a stunt? Was Clint Eastwood in on the drama, or did they just watch a real-time breakdown of the late-night formula? Inside the Jimmy Kimmel Live production office, the atmosphere was tense. Some staffers argued the moment should air untouched, raw, unfiltered, a cultural lightning strike that would go viral. Others begged for edits, softer cuts, a cleaner version. Someone even floated the idea of adding a voiceover disclaimer, but no one could agree on how to frame it. Jimmy's team wasn't just managing a guest walk-off. They were facing a creative crisis. As the chaos simmered, Clint's camp stayed silent. No tweets, no press releases, no frantic interviews. Just a single quote from Maggie, delivered through a brief phone call with a trusted journalist. "He said what mattered," she told them. "That's all there is." The silence wasn't strategy, it was confidence. Clint didn't need a recap, a follow-up, or a spin. The moment had already spoken loud enough. Online, fans and critics clashed about intent, legacy, and respect. But Clint just moved on. There were no hashtags from his account, no reactive statements. He didn't need to clarify. He'd walked in calm, walked out unshaken, and let the noise swirl behind him. Inside ABC and CBS conference rooms, executives scrambled to gauge the fallout. Ratings were through the roof, but questions lingered. How far is too far? And had they just lost the trust of Hollywood's most iconic figure? Kimmel's writers met late that night. Some rewrote jokes. Others just sat quietly, replaying the moment. Everyone knew the truth. Clint Eastwood hadn't been broken by the show. He'd broken it. Clint Eastwood has never been a man who played the Hollywood game. For over 6 decades, he's walked through the film industry with a different compass, one that didn't swing toward applause or trend chasing. From the icy stare of Dirty Harry to the worn, bruised dignity of Walt Kowalski in Gran Torino. His characters never chased popularity. They stood for something. And behind every role, there was always Clint, stoic, grounded, unshaken. His refusal to play along on Jimmy Kimmel's stage wasn't a tantrum or some last-act rebellion. It was something else. It was consistency. The same grit that turned spaghetti westerns into classics, that built a career on silence, speaking louder than sound bites. He's always told stories about men who drew lines and held them. And when those lines were tested, on camera, under lights, with the world watching, Clint did what he's always done. He held. Flashbacks flood the mind. Press tours where he refused staged gags. Red carpets where he skipped the glitz. Interviews where, when pushed, he pushed back. Always calm. Always direct. It wasn't about ego. It was about the principle. You don't mock the craft. You don't disrespect the story. And you don't pull a legend into your circus and expect him to juggle. Clint's walk-off wasn't the act of a man who lost control. It was the act of a man reclaiming it. In an era where fame is built on viral clips and clever edits, he made a different kind of statement. One that didn't need music, graphics, or applause. Just silence. Just a stare. Just a decision not to perform. You don't play games when the stakes are real. That's the line he's lived by. That's the code Jimmy Kimmel ran into. And that's why the moment hits so hard. Because for once, on a stage built for laughs, someone showed up who wasn't laughing. Clint wasn't playing a part. He never has.